Millionaire falls into coma, and a stranger cares for him and his son. Years later, he wakes up and the ending is surprising. Before listening to this incredible story, click subscribe to see more exciting stories like this one and avoid 10 years of bad luck in love. It was a sunny spring afternoon. In the bustling city of New York, Alexander Morgan, a successful 35-year-old businessman, was driving his luxury car down Fifth Avenue, thought his life seemed perfect. A rising career, a mansion in the exclusive Upper East Side neighborhood, and an adorable 7-year-old son, Matthew. However, something was missing in his life, a void that not even success could fill. Meanwhile, on the sidewalk, Catherine Oliver, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher, was walking hurriedly. Her face reflected worry and sadness. She had just left a tense meeting with her lawyer to discuss the terms of her imminent divorce. Her marriage to Richard, a controlling and selfish man, had come to an end after years of unhappiness. Fate, capricious as always, decided to intertwine their lives at that precise moment. Alexander, distracted by an important call, didn't see the red light. Catherine, absorbed in her problems, crossed the street without looking. The screech of brakes echoed in the air, but it was too late. The impact was brutal. Alexander's car crashed into a lamppost, while Catherine miraculously managed to dodge it by inches. The world seemed to stand still for a moment. Catherine, overcoming the initial shock, ran towards the wrecked vehicle. "Sir, can you hear me? Hold on, please," Catherine shouted, trying to open the driver's door. Alexander lay unconscious with a trickle of blood running down his forehead. Catherine, with trembling hands, called emergency services. Minutes later, which seemed eternal, ambulances and police arrived. While paramedics attended to Alexander, Catherine noticed something that chilled her blood. There was a child's backpack in the back seat. "Is there a child?" she frantically asked one of the officers. "No, ma'am, the driver was alone," the policeman responded. "But we've found documentation. He has a young son who was waiting for him at home." Catherine's heart sank. She remembered her own childhood, marked by her father's absence. Without thinking twice, she approached the officer. "Officer, I witnessed the accident. Can I accompany you to the hospital?" "Maybe I can help with the child," Catherine offered, feeling an inexplicable need to get involved. The officer, seeing the sincere concern in Catherine's eyes, nodded. "All right, ma'am, but you'll have to give your statement later." As the ambulance drove away with Alexander, Catherine got into a patrol car, her heart beating fast. She didn't know why, but she felt that this accident would change her life forever. At the hospital, chaos reigned. Alexander was taken directly to surgery, while Catherine waited anxiously in the waiting room. Hours later, a doctor came out with a grave expression. "Family of Alexander Morgan?" Catherine stood up, hesitant. "I witnessed the accident. His son." The doctor looked at her with compassion. "Mr. Morgan is stable, but he has fallen into a coma. We don't know when he'll wake up. Do you know how we can contact his family?" At that moment, a social worker approached. "I've located Mr. Morgan's son. He's with his nanny. But there are no other close relatives. The mother passed away years ago." Catherine felt as if fate was pushing her. Without thinking, twice she said, "I can take care of the child while his father recovers." The social worker looked at her surprised. "Ma'am, that's a very generous offer, but—" "Please," Catherine interrupted, "I'm a teacher. I have experience with children. I can't explain it, but I feel I must do this." After long discussions and background checks, a temporary agreement was reached. Catherine would take care of Matthew while Alexander was in a coma under the supervision of social services. That night, as Catherine took a confused and scared Matthew to her modest apartment, she couldn't help but think about how much her life had changed in a matter of hours. From being on the brink of divorce, she now found herself responsible for a child she had just met. As she tucked Matthew into the guest bed, the boy looked at her with tearful eyes. "Is my dad going to be okay?" Catherine, with a heavy heart, hugged him tightly. "Your dad is strong, Matthew. We're going to take care of him together, okay?" That night, as Catherine looked out the window at the lights of New York, she felt that, for the first time in a long time, she had a purpose. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to face it with courage. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for Catherine and Matthew. The little boy, overwhelmed by his father's absence and the sudden presence of this unknown woman in his life, alternated between moments of melancholic silence and outbursts of rebellion. Catherine, for her part, struggled to balance her work as a teacher, daily visits to the hospital to see Alexander, and caring for Matthew. Every morning before going to school, they would stop by the hospital. Matthew would hold his unconscious father's hand, telling him about his previous day, while Catherine watched with a mixture of tenderness and concern. One afternoon, as Catherine was helping Matthew with his homework, the boy looked up from his notebook and asked, "Catherine, why did you decide to take care of me? You didn't even know me." The question took Catherine by surprise. She put down her pencil on the table and looked Matthew in the eyes. "You know, Matthew, sometimes life presents us with opportunities to do the right thing. When I saw your dad in that accident, I knew I had to help. And when I found out about you, I felt it was my duty to take care of you until your dad recovers." Matthew nodded slowly, processing the words. "Do you think he'll wake up soon?" Catherine gently stroked his hair. "Your dad is very strong, Matthew. We have to have faith and keep visiting him. Our love and support will help him recover." That night, while Matthew slept, Catherine received a call that left her cold. It was Richard, her still husband. "Catherine, where the hell are you? I've been by the apartment several times and you're never there." "What's going on?" Catherine took a deep breath before responding. "Richard, things have changed. I'm taking care of the son of a man who had an accident." "What? Have you gone crazy? How can you do something like that without consulting me?" Richard's voice sounded increasingly agitated. "I don't have to consult you about anything, Richard. Our relationship ended a long time ago. We just need to sign the papers. This is something I decided to do on my own." The argument went on, with Richard threatening to contest the divorce and accusing Catherine of abandonment. When he finally hung up, Catherine sat on the couch, exhausted and with tears in her eyes. Had she made a mistake by getting so involved in Alexander and Matthew's lives? Her doubts dissipated the next morning when Matthew, for the first time since the accident, gave her a spontaneous hug before going to school. "Thank you for taking care of me, Catherine," the boy whispered. Meanwhile, at the hospital, doctors were noticing small but encouraging signs of improvement in Alexander. Although still in a coma, his brain showed more activity, especially during Matthew and Catherine's visits. As the weeks passed, a routine was established. Catherine and Matthew would have breakfast together, then she would take him to school before going to teach her classes. In the afternoons, they would do homework together and then visit Alexander in the hospital. Catherine would read books to Alexander, while Matthew told him about his day. One day, while they were at the hospital, Dr. Ramirez, the neurologist in charge of Alexander, approached them with a smile. "I have good news," said the doctor. "We've noticed a significant increase in Alexander's brain activity. We believe he's responding to your voices and your presence." Catherine and Matthew looked at each other with renewed hope. "Does that mean he's going to wake up soon?" Matthew asked excitedly. Dr. Ramirez put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We can't be sure, Matthew. Each case is different. But this is definitely a good sign. Keep talking to him, reading to him. Your presence seems to be helping a lot." That night, as they had dinner in Catherine's small apartment, Matthew was unusually thoughtful. Finally, he looked up from his plate and said, "Catherine, what will happen when my dad wakes up?" The question caught Catherine off guard. In the past few weeks, she had grown so fond of Matthew that the idea of separating from him caused a sharp pain in her chest. However, she knew she had to be honest. "Well, Matthew, when your dad wakes up, I'm sure he'll want to be with you all the time. You'll probably go back to your home with him." Matthew frowned. "But won't I see you anymore?" Catherine felt a lump form in her throat. "Of course you will, sweetie. If your dad agrees, I'll be able to visit you, and maybe you can come see me from time to time." "Do you promise?" Matthew asked with pleading eyes. "I promise," Catherine replied, trying to hold back tears. That night, after putting Matthew to bed, Catherine sat on the balcony of her apartment, looking at the stars over New York. She realized that, Without intending to, she had fallen in love not only with Matthew, but also with the idea of a family. The possibility of losing all this when Alexander woke up terrified her. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Alexander's fingers moved slightly as if responding to a dream. In his mind, blurry images of a dark-haired woman with a warm smile mixed with his son's laughter. Something was changing in the depths of his unconsciousness, preparing to emerge. The day began like any other for Catherine and Matthew. They had breakfast together, laughing about plans for the weekend, when the phone rang. It was Dr. Ramirez from the hospital. "Mrs. Oliver, I need you to come to the hospital immediately. There has been an important development in Mr. Morgan's case." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Has he woken up?" "I'd prefer to discuss the details in person. Please, come as soon as possible." The trip to the hospital was a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Matthew couldn't stop asking questions that Catherine couldn't answer. When they arrived, Dr. Ramirez was waiting for them. "Alexander has shown clear signs of consciousness," explained the doctor. "He opened his eyes this morning and seems to respond to stimuli. However, he hasn't spoken yet, and we're evaluating his neurological state." Matthew ran towards his father's room with Catherine following closely behind. When they entered, they saw Alexander with his eyes open, looking around in confusion. "Dad!" Matthew cried, throwing himself onto the bed to hug his father. Alexander blinked several times as if trying to focus. Slowly, he raised a hand and placed it on Matthew's head. A tear rolled down his cheek. Catherine stood at the door, not knowing what to do. Part of her wanted to run and hug Alexander too, relieved to see him awake after so many weeks of uncertainty. But another part felt like an intruder in this family moment. Alexander finally noticed her presence and looked at her intently. His eyes showed confusion, as if he were trying to remember something important. Dr. Ramirez entered the room. "Mr. Morgan, can you hear me? If so, blink twice." Alexander blinked slowly, twice. "Excellent. Now, do you know where you are?" Alexander slightly shook his head. "You're in the hospital. You had a car accident and have been in a coma for several weeks. It's normal to feel confused. Over time, you'll recover your memories." Alexander nodded slowly, his gaze returning to Catherine. He tried to speak, but only a hoarse sound came out. "Don't strain yourself, Mr. Morgan," said Dr. Ramirez. "Your throat is irritated from the breathing tube. You'll be able to speak in a few days." Catherine took a step forward, her heart beating fast. "Hello, Alexander, I'm Catherine. I've been taking care of Matthew while you were recovering." Alexander's eyes widened more, a mixture of gratitude and confusion in them. He raised a trembling hand towards her. Catherine instinctively took it, feeling an electric connection when touching him. "Everything's going to be okay," she whispered. "Matthew and I have been coming every day. We've read books to you. We've told you about our days. I think you've been listening to us all this time." Alexander weakly squeezed her hand, a small smile forming on his lips. The following days were a whirlwind of medical exams, therapies, and visits. Alexander progressed rapidly, regaining speech and mobility. However, his memories of the accident and the days before remained blurry. One afternoon, while Matthew played in the hallway under a nurse's supervision, Alexander and Catherine had their first real conversation alone. "I don't know how to thank you for what you've done," said Alexander, his voice still hoarse but stronger. "Taking care of a child you didn't know, especially one as mischievous as Matthew." Catherine smiled. "Matthew is a wonderful boy. It's been a pleasure to take care of him. Besides, I think we've helped each other get through this difficult period." Alexander looked at her intensely. "There's something about you. I feel like I know you from before, but I can't remember from where." Catherine's heart skipped a beat. Could it be possible that Alexander had heard her during his coma? That somehow he had formed memories of her? "Maybe you remember me from your dreams," Catherine joked. Trying to lighten the mood, Alexander smiled. "Maybe you certainly seem like you've come out of a dream." The compliment made Catherine blush. She was about to respond when the door burst open. "Alexander, my love, I've finally found you." An elegant and beautiful woman entered the room, running towards Alexander's bed. Catherine took a step back, surprised. "Lucy?" Alexander asked, clearly confused. "What are you doing here?" The woman, Lucy, leaned in to kiss Alexander on the lips. "Oh, darling, I came as soon as I found out I was in Europe when you had the accident and I just got back." "How do you feel?" Catherine felt as if the floor was moving beneath her feet. Who was this woman? Why was she kissing Alexander? She looked at Alexander, expecting to see surprise or rejection, but only saw confusion and something that seemed like recognition. I'm fine," Alexander replied, his gaze alternating between Lucy and Catherine. "Lucy, this is Catherine. She's been taking care of Matthew while I was in a coma." Lucy looked at Catherine as if she had just noticed her presence. "Oh, how kind of you, I suppose your service is." "Won't be necessary anymore. I'll take care of everything from now on." Catherine felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. I think I should go," she mumbled, heading for the door. "Catherine, wait," Alexander called, but Lucy was already bombarding him with questions and plans for his recovery. Catherine left the room, tears threatening to fall. In the hallway, Matthew looked at her with concern. "Catherine, are you okay? Who's that lady who went into Dad's room?" Catherine knelt in front of Matthew, trying to maintain her composure. "She's a friend of your dad, Matthew. She came to help him now that he's awake." "But you're the one who's been helping us all this time," Matthew protested. "I don't want that lady to replace you." Catherine hugged Matthew, allowing a tear to escape. "Nobody's replacing me, sweetie. Your dad is awake now, and that's what's... Important things are going to change a little, but I'll always be here for you, remember? I promised you." As she hugged Matthew, Catherine couldn't stop thinking about Alexander and Lucy. Who was this woman, really? And what did her appearance mean for the fragile world that Catherine had built over the past few weeks? That night back in her apartment, Catherine couldn't sleep. The images of Lucy kissing Alexander kept replaying in her mind. She realized, with a mixture of surprise and pain, that she had fallen in love with Alexander without even really knowing him. How could she compete with a woman like Lucy? Meanwhile, at the hospital, Alexander lay awake, his mind a whirlwind of confused thoughts, images of Catherine reading to him, of her warm smile mixed with blurry memories of Lucy. Who was Lucy really to him? And why, despite her presence, couldn't he stop thinking about Catherine? The next morning, Catherine received an unexpected call. It was Alexander's assistant. "Mrs. Oliver, Mr. Morgan requests your presence at the hospital this afternoon. He says it's urgent." Catherine felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. What could Alexander want? And how would this affect the complicated situation they were in? With her heart in her throat, Catherine prepared to face whatever fate had in store for her. Little did she know that the revelations that were about to come would shake the foundations of everything she thought she knew about Alexander, Lucy, and her own role in this intricate story of love and destiny. Catherine arrived at the hospital that afternoon, with her heart pounding. Alexander's call had left, her intrigued and nervous. When she entered the room, she was surprised to see only Alexander, with no trace of Lucy. "Catherine, thank you for coming," said Alexander, his voice stronger than the day before. "Please sit down, we have a lot to talk about." Catherine sat in the chair next to the bed, noticing the intensity in Alexander's eyes. "Is everything okay? Where's Lucy?" Alexander sighed deeply. "That's one of the things I want to talk to you about. But first, I need you to tell me everything about the accident and how you ended up taking care of Matthew. There are many gaps in my memory, and I feel like you're the only one who can help me fill them." Catherine nodded and began to recount the events from the day of the accident. She told him about how she had witnessed the crash, how she had offered to take care of Matthew, and how they had spent the last few weeks together. As she spoke, she noticed how Alexander's expression changed, going from surprise to gratitude, and finally to something that seemed like admiration. When she finished, Alexander took her hand. "Catherine, I can't express how much what you've done means to me. You've been a guardian, angel for Matthew and for me." Catherine felt herself blushing. Anyone would have done the same. "No, Catherine, not anyone, you're special." Alexander paused as if gathering courage. "There's something I need to confess to you about Lucy." Catherine held her breath, preparing for the worst. "Lucy is not my partner," said Alexander. "She's my ex-girlfriend. We broke up over a year ago before Matthew was born. Her appearance yesterday took me completely by surprise." Catherine felt a mixture of relief and confusion. "But she kissed you and she seemed so sure of her position." Alexander frowned. "Yes, and that bothered me a lot. I talked to her after you left. It seems she thought she could take advantage of my state of confusion to come back into my life. I made it very clear that wasn't going to happen." "Why are you telling me all this?" asked Catherine, her heart beating even faster. Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. "Because during my coma, although I couldn't move or speak, I heard your voice every day, reading to me, telling me about your day and Matthew's. I felt your presence, your warmth. And although I've just really met you, I feel like I've known you for a long time." Catherine felt tears forming in her eyes. I feel that connection too," she admitted. "Catherine, I know this may sound rushed, but would you like to go out with me when I'm discharged? I'd like to get to know you better, outside the context of the hospital and my accident." Before Catherine could respond, the door burst open. It was Richard, Catherine's husband, with a furious expression on his face. "So here you are," Richard shouted. "Is this the man you've been cheating on me with?" Catherine stood up, surprised and horrified. "Richard, what are you doing here? I haven't cheated on you with anyone." Alexander looked confused between Catherine and Richard. "Who is this man, Catherine?" Richard approached threateningly. "I'm her husband. Who the hell are you?" The room fell into a tense silence. Catherine, feeling cornered, finally spoke. "Alexander, I'm sorry. I should have told you that I'm in the process of getting divorced, Richard, and I have been separated for months." Alexander processed the information, his face a mixture of surprise and disappointment. "Why didn't you tell me?" I didn't know how," Catherine responded, tears running down her cheeks. "Everything happened so fast with the accident and Matthew—" Richard interrupted. "Matthew? Who's Matthew? Do you have a child with this guy?" "No," Catherine shouted. "Matthew is Alexander's son. I've been taking care of him while Alexander was in a coma." The confusion on Richard's face transformed into bitter laughter. "Unbelievable, you refused to have children with me for years, and now you're playing mom to a stranger's kid." Richard's words hit Catherine like a punch. It was true. Her refusal to have children had been one of the points of conflict in their marriage. But taking care of Matthew had opened her eyes to a world of possibilities she had never considered before. Alexander, recovering from the initial surprise, intervened. "Sir, I ask you to calm down. We're in a hospital and this discussion isn't getting us anywhere." Richard turned to Alexander, furious. "You stay out of this. This is between my wife and me, ex-wife." Catherine corrected, finding her voice. "Richard, our marriage ended a long time ago and we both know it. What I do with my life now is none of your business." "Oh, really?" Richard replied. "Well, we'll see what the judge says when he finds out you've been living with another man and his son. You can forget about an amicable divorce." With those words, Richard stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Catherine collapsed in the chair, sobbing. Alexander, overcoming his own shock, reached out to her. "Catherine, look at me." She looked up, her eyes full of tears and fear. "I don't know exactly what's going on," Alexander said softly, "but I do know that you're a good person. You've taken care of my son when you didn't have to. I'm not going to judge you for your past or for the things you haven't told me yet. But I need you to be honest with me now." Catherine nodded, wiping away her tears. "I'm so sorry, Alexander. I should have told you about Richard from the beginning. I was so focused on taking care of Matthew and you that I almost forgot my own situation. But I swear there's been nothing between Richard and me for a long time." Alexander looked at her for a long moment, as if searching for the truth in her eyes. Finally, he smiled softly. "I believe you, Catherine, and I still want to get to know you better, if you want." Catherine felt a wave of relief and gratitude. "Yes, I want that too. But Alexander, there's something else you should know." Catherine took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to reveal could change everything. "During these weeks taking care of Matthew, I've realized something. I think I've fallen in love with him and with you." Alexander looked at her surprised, but before he could respond, the door opened again. This time it was Matthew, accompanied by a nurse. "Dad, Catherine!" exclaimed the boy, running towards them. He stopped when he saw the tears on Catherine's face. "What's wrong? Why are you crying, Catherine?" Catherine tried to smile, wiping away her tears. "It's nothing, sweetie. We were just talking about adult things." Matthew looked at his father and then at Catherine, his little face full of concern. "Are they going to separate us? I don't want Catherine to go, Dad. I love her." Alexander looked at his son, then at Catherine, and finally back at Matthew. "No one's going to separate. Champ Catherine has been very good to us, hasn't she?" Matthew nodded vigorously. "She's the best. She helps me with my homework and makes pancakes on Sundays. And she always reads me stories before bed, just like Mom used to do." The mention of Matthew's mother made Catherine and Alexander exchange a look. There was so much they still hadn't told each other, so many details of their lives that they didn't know. Alexander leaned towards his son. "Matthew, could you go with the nurse for a moment? I need to talk about something important with Catherine." Matthew nodded, although reluctantly, and left the room with the nurse. Once alone, Alexander took Catherine's hand. "Catherine, what you just said, is it true? Have you fallen in love with us?" Catherine nodded, tears threatening to fall again. "I know it sounds crazy, we barely know each other, and this whole situation is so complicated. But these weeks with Matthew, listening to you, taking care of you, I've felt something I've never experienced before." Alexander looked at her intently. "I felt something too, Catherine. Even in my comatose state, I could feel your presence, your kindness. And since I woke up, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you." They looked at each other for a long moment, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Alexander spoke. "But there's something I have to tell you, something that complicates things even more." He paused as if gathering courage. "Matthew's mother, my ex-wife, she didn't die, as everyone believes." Catherine looked at him surprised. "What do you mean?" Alexander sighed deeply. "Her name is Emily. She disappeared 2 years ago, shortly after Matthew was born. The police searched for her for months, but they never found her. Everyone assumed she had died, but I've always had a feeling she's alive somewhere." Catherine felt as if the floor was moving beneath her feet. "Alexander, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because until now, it was just a hunch. But yesterday, after you left, I received a call. It was Emily." The shock on Catherine's face was evident. "What? Where has she been all this time?" Alexander shook his head. "I don't know. The call was very brief. She said she was in danger, that she couldn't explain anything over the phone. She asked me to meet her in secret." Catherine stood up, overwhelmed by the information. "Then what does this mean for us?" Alexander looked at her with a mixture of pain and determination. "I don't know, Catherine. Everything is so confusing now. But what I do know is that I don't want to lose you or Matthew. I need to find out what happened to Emily, for Matthew's sake and for my own. But I also know that what I feel for you is real." At that moment, the door opened again. It was Dr. Ramirez with a grave expression on his face. "Mr. Morgan, Mrs. Oliver, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have urgent news." He paused, looking at both of. "So that we've received the results of some additional tests we did on Alexander. I'm afraid we've discovered something worrying." Catherine and Alexander looked at each other, fear reflected in their eyes. What new complication awaited them now? Dr. Ramirez continued, "The tests show traces of a toxic substance in Alexander's system. We believe that he may have been poisoned before the accident." The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. Catherine put a hand to her mouth. Horrified, Alexander, for his part, visibly paled. "Poisoned?" Alexander repeated, incredulous. "But who would want to harm me?" Dr. Ramirez shook his head. "We don't know, but we've informed the police. They'll have to investigate the accident from a new perspective." Catherine, recovering from the initial shock, turned to Alexander. "Emily's call. Do you think it could be related to this?" Alexander looked at her, a new understanding forming in his eyes. My God, Catherine, what if Emily disappeared because she discovered something? What if she's trying to warn me now? Dr. Ramirez looked at them confused. Emily? Matthew's mother? I thought she had passed away. Alexander shook his head. It's a long story, Doctor. But now, more than ever, I need to get out of here and find out what's going on. Catherine took Alexander's hand, her determination overcoming her fear. You're not alone in this, Alexander. I'll be with you every step of the way. Alexander looked at her with gratitude and something more, something that seemed like love. Thank you, Catherine. But this could be dangerous. I don't want to put you or Matthew at risk. Catherine squeezed his hand. We're already involved, Alexander. Matthew needs you. I need you. We'll face this together. As they looked at each other, a new resolution was forming between them. What had started as an unexpected love story was turning into something much bigger and more dangerous. Buried secrets were coming to light, and it seemed that Alexander's accident was just the tip of the iceberg. Who wanted to harm Alexander? What had Emily discovered that forced her to disappear? And in the midst of all this mystery and danger, how could Catherine and Alexander protect their budding love and Matthew? As the sun set over New York, illuminating the hospital room with a golden glow, Catherine and Alexander prepared to face the unknown. One thing was certain: their lives would never be the same again. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Alexander, still recovering, insisted on being discharged earlier than recommended by the doctors. Catherine, torn between her concern for his health and the urgency of the situation, finally agreed to help him. Meanwhile, the police had initiated an investigation into the alleged poisoning. The detective in charge, a man named Jack Sullivan, showed up at the hospital to interrogate Alexander. Mr. Morgan, Detective Sullivan began, I need you to tell me everything you remember from the days prior to the accident. Did you notice anything unusual? Someone following you, perhaps? Alexander frowned, straining to remember. I'm sorry, Detective. Much of those days are blurry for me, but... But what? Sullivan pressed. There was a meeting, a few days before the accident, with the board of directors of my company. I remember it was tense. Catherine, who was present during the interrogation, intervened. Alexander, what was that meeting about? Alexander looked at her, grateful for her presence. We were discussing a new project. Something big, something that could change the entire industry, but there were disagreements about how to proceed. Detective Sullivan took notes quickly. Can you give me the names of everyone present at that meeting? Alexander nodded and began to list the names. When he finished, the detective stood up. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We'll investigate thoroughly. For now, I suggest you be careful. Whoever is behind, this might try again. After the detective left, Catherine sat next to Alexander, taking his hand. What are we going to do now? Alexander looked at her with determination. We need to meet with Emily. She must know something. But first, we have to get Matthew out of the city. It's not safe for him here. Catherine nodded. I know a place. My aunt has a house in the outskirts of Philadelphia. We could take Matthew there. It's perfect, said Alexander. But Catherine, I don't want to put you in danger. Maybe you should go with Matthew. Catherine interrupted him. Don't even think about it. We're in this together, remember? Alexander looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but we have to be careful. That night, after explaining to Matthew that they were going on a vacation to Philadelphia, Catherine and Alexander sat in Catherine's apartment living room, planning their next move. Emily said to meet her at the old lighthouse in Cape May. Alexander explained, It's a secluded place, but it has meaning for us. It's where we got engaged. Catherine felt a pang of jealousy, but quickly suppressed it. This wasn't the time for those feelings. When is the meeting? She asked. Tomorrow night, Alexander replied. After leaving Matthew in Philadelphia, we'll go straight. As they discussed the details, Catherine's phone rang. It was an unknown number. With her heart racing, she answered. Hello? Catherine, said a female voice on the other end of the line. It's Emily. Catherine gasped, looking at Alexander with wide eyes. He immediately understood and moved closer to listen. "Emily?" said Catherine, trying to stay calm. "How?" "There's no time for explanations," Emily interrupted. "Listen carefully. Don't come to the lighthouse tomorrow. It's a trap." "What, but you—" "It wasn't me who called Alexander," Emily said, her voice full of urgency. "Someone is using my name. Catherine, you have to protect Matthew." The line abruptly cut off. Catherine and Alexander looked at each other, fear reflected in their eyes. "What's going on, Alexander?" Catherine whispered. Alexander shook his head, his face pale. "I don't know, but it seems we're involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than we thought." At that moment they heard a noise at the door. Both jumped to their feet. Alexander protectively stood in front of Catherine. The door slowly opened, revealing a figure in the shadows. Catherine stifled a scream as the figure stepped forward into the light. It was Richard. "Well, well," Richard said, his voice cold and threatening. "What a touching scene." Alexander stepped forward. "What are you doing here, Richard?" Richard smiled, but it was a humorless smile. "Oh, just stopping by to say hello to my dear wife and her new friend." He paused, looking around the apartment. "Where's the boy?" "Matthew, right?" Catherine felt fear invading her. "Richard, get out of here right now or I'll call the police." Richard laughed. "The police? Oh, Catherine, always so naive. Do you think the police can protect you from what's coming?" Alexander took another step forward, his voice firm despite the fear he felt. "What are you talking about, Richard? What do you know about all this?" Richard looked at both of them, a cruel smile forming on his lips. "I know a lot more than you think. For example, I know that Emily is alive. I know about the secret project of your company, Alexander. And I know that both of you are in grave danger." Catherine and Alexander exchanged shocked looks. How could Richard know all this? "Who are you really, Richard?" Catherine asked, her voice trembling slightly. Richard approached them, his threatening presence filling the room. "That, my dear Catherine, is the million-dollar question and the answer. Well, the answer could cost you your lives." The silence that followed those words was deafening. Catherine and Alexander remained, motionless, their minds desperately trying to process the situation. Finally, Alexander spoke, his voice tense but controlled. "If you know so much, Richard, why are you here? What do you want from us?" Richard walked slowly around the room, his eyes never leaving the couple. "What I want, Alexander, is very simple. I want you to hand over all the files of Project Phoenix." Alexander's eyes widened. "How do you know about Project Phoenix?" Catherine looked confused between the two men. "What is Project Phoenix?" Richard laughed. "Oh, haven't you told your new girlfriend about your little secret project, Alexander? How rude of you." Alexander clenched his fists. "Project Phoenix is classified. Not even most of the board of directors knows all the details. And yet I know," Richard said with a smug smile. "Imagine that." Catherine stepped forward, her fear giving way to anger. "Enough games, Richard. Who do you really work for?" Richard looked at her, a spark of something like pride in his eyes. "You were always smart, Catherine. It's a shame you wasted your potential being a simple teacher." He turned to Alexander. "As for your question, let's say I represent a group of people very interested in Project Phoenix, people who will stop at nothing to obtain it." Alexander shook his head. "I can't give you that information, Richard. It's too dangerous in the wrong hands." "And who decides which are the right hands, Alexander?" Richard asked, his voice hardening. "You, your board of directors, the government?" He took a threatening step towards them. "I'll put it simply. Either you give me the Project Phoenix files, or the next time you see Emily will be in a body bag." Catherine gasped. "You have Emily," Richard smiled. "Let's say I know exactly where she is, and her safety depends entirely on Alexander's cooperation." Alexander seemed to be struggling internally. "How do I know you really have Emily? That this isn't just another trick?" Richard took out his phone and after a few seconds turned it to show them the screen on it was an image of Emily, clearly frightened, holding a newspaper with that day's date. "Is that proof enough for you?" Richard asked. Alexander closed, his eyes defeated. "What guarantee do I have that you'll release her if I give you what you want?" "You have my word," said Richard. Catherine let out a bitter laugh. "Your word, the word of a liar and a traitor?" Richard looked at her, his eyes cold. "My word is all you have right now. Besides, once I have the files, Emily will no longer be of use to me." Alexander looked at Catherine, his eyes full of pain and conflict. She understood. Without needing words, he was going to give in. "Okay," Alexander finally said. "I'll give you the Project Phoenix files, but I need time to access them safely." Richard nodded. "You have 24 hours, not a minute more, and if you try anything funny, Emily will pay the price." He headed towards the door, but before leaving, he turned one last time. "Oh, and don't even think about trying to run away with Matthew. We'll be watching you." With that, he disappeared into the night, leaving Catherine and Alexander in a stunned silence. As soon as they were sure Richard had gone, Catherine turned to Alexander. "What are we going to do? We can't give him that information, whatever it is." Alexander ran a hand through his hair, clearly distressed. "I don't know, Catherine. Project Phoenix, it's more than just information. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could change the world as we know it." "What's it about exactly?" Catherine asked Alexander, looked at her, internally debating how much to reveal. Finally, he sighed. "It's a new form of energy, clean, practically inexhaustible. It could solve the global energy crisis once and for all." Catherine's eyes widened. "That sounds amazing. Why keep it a secret?" "Because in the wrong hands, it could also be used as a devastating weapon," Alexander replied. "Imagine being able to cut off the energy supply of entire countries with just the push of a button." Catherine shuddered at the idea. "My God, Alexander, what have you gotten yourself into?" "I never wanted things to go this far," said Alexander, his voice full of remorse. "I just wanted to make the world a better place." Catherine took his hand. "I know. But now we have to think about how to get out of this situation. We can't give that information to Richard, but we also can't leave Emily in danger." Alexander nodded, squeezing Catherine's hand. "You're right, we need a plan." At that moment, Catherine's phone vibrated. It was a message from an unknown number. With trembling hands, she opened it. "If you want to save Emily and protect Project Phoenix, find the Blue Gardenia. She has the answers you seek." Catherine showed the message to Alexander. "What does this mean? Who is the Blue Gardenia?" Alexander frowned, thoughtful. "I'm not sure, but wait. Emily used to use that name as a pseudonym when we were young. She wrote poetry under that name." Catherine's eyes lit up. "Do you think this message could be from her?" "It's possible," said Alexander, "but it could also be another trap." They looked at each other, determination growing in their eyes. They knew they were on the brink of something big, dangerous, and potentially deadly, but they also knew they had no choice but to move forward. "What do we do now?" Catherine asked Alexander. Looked at her, his face a mixture of fear and resolution. "We have to find the Blue Gardenia. It's our only clue." Catherine nodded. "But what about Matthew? We can't leave him alone, especially now that we know Richard is watching us." Alexander thought for a moment. "I'll call my assistant, Sarah. She's trustworthy and can take care of Matthew for now. We'll tell her to take him to a hotel under a false name." "Are you sure we can trust her?" Catherine asked. "At this point, she's the only option we have," Alexander replied. While Alexander made the call, Catherine began searching the internet for any reference to Blue Gardenia that might be related to Emily. After several minutes, she found something. "Alexander, look at this," she exclaimed. "There's an art exhibition at a gallery downtown. One of the pieces is called The Dream of the Blue Gardenia." Alexander quickly approached. "When is the exhibition?" "Tonight," Catherine replied. "It's the opening." They looked at each other, adrenaline rushing through their veins. "It could be a coincidence," said Alexander. "Or it could be our only chance," Catherine replied. Alexander nodded. "All right, we'll go to that exhibition, but we have to be extremely careful, Richard, and whoever he's working with could be watching us." Catherine took Alexander's hand. "We're in this together, remember? Whatever happens." Alexander looked at her, a mixture of love and concern in his eyes. "Catherine, if anything happens to me, I want you to know." Catherine put a finger to his lips, gently silencing him. "I know me too, but we're going to get through this together." We'll find. Emily, protect Matthew and stop Richard. They hugged tightly, finding strength and comfort in each other's arms. Then, with one last look of determination, they began to prepare for what promised to be a night that would change their lives forever. As they got ready to leave, neither of them noticed the small hidden camera in the corner of the room, transmitting their every move to an unknown location where a shadowy figure watched with growing interest. The game was on, and the pieces were beginning to move in this dangerous game of secrets, betrayal, and unexpected love. Night was falling over New York when Catherine and Alexander arrived at the art gallery. The building, a modern structure of glass and steel, shone like a beacon in the darkness. Despite the urgency of their mission, they couldn't help but feel impressed by the elegance of the place. "Remember," Alexander whispered as they entered, "we have to be discreet. Look for anything that might be related to Emily or the blue gardenia." Catherine nodded, adjusting the elegant black dress she had put on for the occasion. She felt out of place in this world of art and wealth, but reminded herself that they were on a crucial mission. The gallery was full of high society people, sipping champagne and discussing art in hushed tones. Catherine and Alexander separated, mingling with the crowd and examining each work of art carefully. After several minutes of fruitless searching, Catherine found herself in front of a painting that took her breath away. It was an abstract painting, dominated by shades of blue and violet. In the center, barely visible among swirls of color, the shape of a flower could be distinguished. "The dream of the blue gardenia," Catherine read on the plaque next to the painting. She felt her heart race. This had to be it. She looked for Alexander and saw him across the room. She was about to signal him when a voice behind her startled her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Catherine turned and found herself face to face with an elegant middle-aged woman. There was something familiar about her, but Catherine couldn't place what it was. "Yes, it's fascinating," Catherine replied, trying to stay calm. The woman smiled. "The artist has a gift for capturing the essence of hidden things, don't you think?" Before Catherine could respond, the woman continued, "Tell me, what do you see when you look at this painting?" Catherine looked at the painting again, this time more closely. "I see secrets, layers and layers of secrets, as if the flower were trying to emerge from a sea of mysteries." The woman's smile widened. "Very perceptive. And tell me, Catherine, are you ready to dive into that sea of mysteries?" Catherine's heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name?" The woman moved closer, lowering her voice. "Because I am the blue gardenia, and I've been waiting for you." At that moment, Alexander approached them, his face a mixture of shock and recognition. "Emily?" The woman, Emily, put a finger to her lips. "Shh, not here. Follow me." She led them through the gallery to a back door that opened onto a dark alley. Once outside, Emily looked at both of them intensely. "We don't have much time. Richard and his people are everywhere." Alexander interrupted her. "Emily, what's going on? Why did you disappear? And how does Richard fit into all this?" Emily sighed. "It's a long story, Alexander. But the important thing is that I discovered something about Project Phoenix, something that could change everything." Catherine, who had been observing in silence, intervened. "What did you discover?" Emily looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and approval. "You must be Catherine Alexander. You have good taste." Alexander blushed slightly, but Catherine ignored it, focusing on Emily. "Please tell us what's going on." Emily nodded. "Project Phoenix isn't just a new energy source, it's much more than that. It has the potential to—" Suddenly, a gunshot was heard. Emily staggered backward, her eyes wide with shock. Alexander caught her before she fell to the ground. "Emily!" he shouted, while Catherine looked around frantically, searching for the shooter. "Go," Emily whispered, her voice weak. "The truth is in the painting, the blue. Gardenia has the answers." With those words, Emily lost consciousness. Alexander held her, his shirt quickly staining with her blood. "Catherine, we have to go," Alexander shouted. Catherine, paralyzed by shock, reacted to Alexander's cry. Together, they lifted Emily and began to run down the alley, the sound of hurried footsteps and shouts behind them. "This way!" Catherine yelled, pointing towards a side street. They ducked into it just as another bullet whistled past their heads. They ran aimlessly, Emily's weight hindering their escape. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they found an abandoned taxi on a corner. "Get in," Alexander ordered Catherine while he placed Emily in the back seat. Alexander got behind the wheel and, thanks to hacking skills Catherine didn't know he had, managed to start the vehicle in seconds. As they sped away, Catherine turned to Emily in the back seat. "She's losing a lot of blood," she said with a trembling voice. Alexander looked in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of concern. "We can't take her to a hospital, they'd find us immediately." "Then what do we do?" Catherine asked, applying pressure to Emily's wound. Alexander thought for a moment. "I know someone, a doctor, who owes me a favor. He'll help us without asking questions." As they headed towards the address Alexander had mentioned, Catherine noticed that Emily was mumbling something. The painting, she repeated weakly. "What do you mean, Emily?" Catherine asked, leaning in closer. Emily opened her eyes with difficulty. "The blue gardenia. It's not just a name. It's a key. The painting hides something." Before Catherine could ask more, Emily lost consciousness again. They arrived at a small clinic in a neighborhood, far from downtown Dr. Martinez. A middle-aged man with a tired look greeted them at the back door. "Alexander, what trouble have you gotten yourself into this time?" he asked. But upon seeing Emily's condition, he immediately went into professional mode. "Bring her inside, quickly." While Dr. Martinez worked to save Emily, Catherine and Alexander waited in a small room, their hands intertwined in a tense grip. "Alexander," Catherine whispered, "what are we going to do now? Richard knows we have Emily. He'll come for us." Alexander nodded gravely. "I know. But before that happens, we have to figure out what secret that painting is hiding." "Do you really think there's something hidden in it?" Catherine asked. "Emily wouldn't lie about something like that, especially in her condition," Alexander replied. "Besides, it's our only clue right now." Catherine bit her lip, thoughtful. "But the painting is in the gallery. How are we going to access it?" Alexander looked at her, a spark of determination in his eyes. "We'll have to steal it." Catherine stared at him, mouth agape. "Steal it, Alexander? That's crazy. We'll get arrested." "It's a risk we'll have to take," Alexander said. "It's the only way to find out what's going on and protect Matthew." Before Catherine could respond, Dr. Martinez came out of the operating room, taking off his blood-stained gloves. "I managed to stabilize her," he said. "The bullet didn't hit any vital organs, but she lost a lot of blood. She'll need time to recover." Alexander and Catherine sighed in relief. "Thank you, Doctor," Alexander said. "Can we see her?" Dr. Martinez nodded. "She's sedated, but you can go in for a moment." They entered the room where Emily lay, pale but stable. Catherine approached the bed and took Emily's hand. "She's going to be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the others. Alexander put a hand on Catherine's shoulder. "We have to go. It's not safe to stay in one place for too long." Catherine nodded reluctantly. She turned to Dr. Martinez. "Can you take care of her?" The doctor nodded. "I will. But Alexander, whatever you're involved in, be careful. There are rumors about dangerous experiments and corrupt corporations." Alexander frowned. "What kind of rumors?" Dr. Martinez lowered his voice. "They say there's an organization, one that operates in the shadows. They're after a revolutionary energy source. Some call it the Phoenix." Catherine and Alexander exchanged surprised looks. Project Phoenix wasn't as secret as they thought. "Thanks for the warning, Doctor," Alexander said. "Keep Emily safe. We'll be back soon." As they left the clinic, Catherine suddenly stopped. "Alexander, what about Matthew? With all this, we almost forgot about him." Alexander took out his phone. "I'll call Sarah to see how he's doing." He dialed the number, but after several attempts, no one answered. "That's strange. Sarah always answers her phone." A chill ran down Catherine's spine. "Alexander, I have a bad feeling about this." Alexander nodded, his face tense. "Me too. Come on, we have to go to the hotel where they're supposed to be." As they headed to the hotel, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that they were falling deeper and deeper into a labyrinth of secrets and dangers. The painting, Project Phoenix Richard, the mysterious shadow organization, Everything seemed to be connected, somehow, and at the center of it all was Matthew. An innocent child trapped in a deadly game he didn't understand. "We're going to find him," Alexander said, as if he could read Catherine's thoughts, "and we're going to get to the bottom of all this." Catherine squeezed his hand. "Together," she said as they approached the hotel. They didn't notice the black car following them at a prudent distance. Inside, a shadowy figure was talking on the phone. "We have them in sight," the voice said. "Shall I proceed with the capture?" The response he received made a cold smile spread across his face. "Understood, the final phase of the plan is underway." The black car increased its speed, getting closer and closer to Catherine and Alexander, who, absorbed in their concern for Matthew, didn't notice the danger looming over them. The night in New York, once quiet, now seemed to vibrate with a sinister energy. Buried secrets were about to come to light, and the consequences threatened to shake the very foundations of the city and the lives of everyone involved. The Belmont Hotel towered imposingly against the night sky of New York. Catherine and Alexander arrived breathless, adrenaline coursing through their veins. However, upon entering the lobby, they realized something was wrong. The place was too quiet, almost deserted. "Good evening," Alexander said to the receptionist, trying to maintain his composure. "We're looking for Sarah Thompson and a young boy they checked in today." The receptionist typed on his computer and frowned. "I'm sorry, sir. We have no record of a Sarah Thompson or a child checking in today." Catherine and Alexander exchanged panicked looks. "There must be a mistake," Catherine insisted. "Please check again." While the receptionist verified once more, Alexander noticed something out of the corner of his eye, a security camera in the corner of the lobby. He approached Catherine and whispered, "We need to see the security footage." Catherine nodded and turned to the receptionist. "Excuse me, could we speak with the manager? It's a family emergency." After a few minutes of discussion and a generous tip, they managed to access the security room. The guard on duty, an older man named Robert, looked at them curiously as they reviewed the day's recordings. "There," Catherine suddenly exclaimed, pointing at the screen in the video. Sarah could be seen entering the hotel with Matthew, but what came next made their blood run cold. Minutes later, a group of men in dark suits entered the hotel. One of them was carrying Matthew, who appeared to be asleep or drugged. Sarah was nowhere to be seen. "Oh my God," Catherine whispered, clinging to Alexander's arm. "They've taken him." Alexander, his face pale but determined, turned to Robert. "We need a copy of this recording its evidence of a kidnapping." Robert, visibly nervous, nodded and began to make a copy. Meanwhile, Catherine noticed something on another screen. "Alexander, look." In the current recording of the parking lot, the same black car that had followed them earlier could be seen. "They've found us," Alexander said. "We have to get out of here, now." Grabbing the copy of the recording, they ran towards the emergency exit. Just as they were about to reach their car, they heard shouts and hurried footsteps behind them. "There they are, get them." Catherine and Alexander jumped into the car and sped off, with the black vehicle hot on their heels. "Where are we going?" Catherine shouted as Alexander zigzagged through the streets of New York. "To the only person who can help us now," Alexander responded, making a sharp turn. "My old friend, Detective Jack Sullivan." After a frantic chase through the city, they managed to lose their pursuers and arrived at a modest apartment building. Detective Sullivan, a middle-aged man, with tired but alert eyes, greeted them with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Alexander, what the hell is going on?" he asked, quickly ushering them inside. In the next few minutes, Catherine and Alexander told him everything. Project Phoenix, the attempt on Emily's life, Matthew's kidnapping, the mysterious blue gardenia painting. Sullivan listened in silence, his frown deepening with each passing moment. When they finished, he stood up and began pacing the room. "This is bigger than you imagine," he finally said. "I've been investigating a series of seemingly unrelated cases, disappearances, suspicious accidents, millionaire transfers to offshore accounts. Now I see that it's all connected." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked. Sullivan approached a board covered with photos and notes. "I believe we're dealing with a clandestine organization. They call themselves the Illuminati. They've been infiltrating corporations, governments, even the police. Their ultimate goal seems to be total control of global energy resources. Alexander turned pale. Project Phoenix, if they get that technology. Exactly, Sullivan nodded. They would have the power to control global energy. Entire countries would be at their mercy. Catherine, who had been processing all this information, suddenly had a revelation. The painting Emily said the truth was in the blue gardenia painting. What if it contains information about the Illuminati? Alexander looked at her with admiration. That would explain why they were so desperate to prevent us from seeing it up close. Sullivan nodded. It's a solid theory, but that painting will now be more protected than ever. We have to recover it, Alexander said with determination. It's our only clue to find Matthew. And stop the Illuminati. Catherine looked at him, a mixture of fear and resolution in her eyes. How are we going to do it? The gallery will be under surveillance. Sullivan smiled for the first time that night. Maybe I can help with that. I have some contacts in the art world who owe us favors. We could organize an unofficial acquisition. Alexander looked at Catherine. It's risky. If we get caught. Catherine took his hand. We'll do whatever it takes to save Matthew and stop those lunatics. Sullivan looked at both of them with a mixture of admiration and concern. All right then, let's start planning our little heist. As the three of them leaned over the gallery map, discussing strategies and possible scenarios, none of them noticed the small blinking light on Sullivan's desk lamp. A light that indicated that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to an unknown location. In a dark room miles away, a figure was listening intently to the conversation. A cold smile formed on his lips as he turned off the listening device. Excellent, he murmured. Everything is going according to plan. The figure stood up and approached a wall covered with screens. On one of them, a frightened Matthew could be seen, curled up in a corner of a sterile room. Soon, very soon, the figure murmured, touching the image of the child on the screen. Meanwhile, in Sullivan's apartment, the plan to recover the painting was taking shape. The gallery has a state-of-the-art security system, Sullivan explained, pointing to a blueprint of the building, cameras, motion sensors, armed guards. But it has a weak point. What is it? Alexander asked, leaning over the map. Sullivan smiled. The owner's ego. He organizes a private party every month to show off new acquisitions to his closest friends, and it turns out the next one is tomorrow night. Catherine frowned. How are we going to get in? I doubt. We're on the guest list. That's where my contacts come in, Sullivan replied. I can get you fake identities. You'll enter as a wealthy art collector and his wife. Alexander and Catherine exchanged glances. Despite the gravity of the situation, they couldn't help but blush slightly at the idea of pretending to be husband and wife. Once inside, Sullivan continued, you'll have to find a way to access the storage room where they keep the works that aren't on display. That's where they'll have moved, the dream of the blue gardenia after tonight's incident. And how are we supposed to do that without getting caught? Catherine asked. Alexander, who had been thoughtful, spoke up. We'll need a distraction. Something to keep the guards and guests occupied. Sullivan nodded. I have an idea for that, but it'll be risky. They spent the next few hours perfecting every detail of the plan. When they finally finished, the sun was beginning to peek over the horizon. You should rest a bit, Sullivan said. Tomorrow will be a long day. Catherine and Alexander nodded. Exhausted, Sullivan offered them his guest room, and both, too tired to protest, accepted. Once alone in the small room, the tension between them was palpable. Catherine, Alexander began, his voice soft, I want you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, I'm grateful to have you by my side in this. Catherine looked at him, her eyes shining with contained emotion. Alexander, But before she could finish, Alexander kissed her. It was a desperate kiss, full of fear for the future and the intensity of their feelings. When they finally separated, both were breathless. I love you, Alexander whispered. I know it's crazy that we've known each other for such a short time, but Catherine put a finger to his lips, gently silencing him. I love you too, and together we're going to get Matthew back and stop those madmen. They hugged tightly, finding comfort and strength in each other's arms. Finally, exhausted, they fell asleep, their bodies intertwined as if they feared separating. Morning came too soon. Sullivan woke them with urgent news. "I've received information from one of my informants," he said, his face grave. "The Illuminati are planning something big, something that has to do with Project Phoenix, and that will happen in the next few days." "What is it?" Alexander asked, now fully awake. Sullivan shook his head. "I don't know for certain, but whatever it is, it has to do with a secret facility on the outskirts of the city. My informant called it the Hive." Catherine and Alexander exchanged worried looks. "Do you think that's where they're keeping Matthew?" Catherine asked. "It's possible," Sullivan replied, "but first, we need to get that painting. It might contain information about the Hive." The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparations. Sullivan got them elegant clothes and fake documents. He taught them the basics of how to behave at a high-level gala, and most importantly, they went over the plan again and again until each of them knew their role perfectly. When night finally arrived, Catherine and Alexander were ready. She was dressed in an elegant black dress that accentuated her figure, and he was in a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a James Bond movie. "Remember," Sullivan said as he dropped them off near the gallery, "if anything goes wrong, abort the mission immediately. It's not worth getting caught." Both nodded, the gravity of what they were about to do weighing on them. "Good luck," Sullivan added, before driving away in his car. Catherine and Alexander looked at each other one last time, took a deep breath and began walking towards the gallery entrance. "Are you ready, darling?" Alexander asked, playing his role as a wealthy collector. Catherine smiled, entering. Her character, "Of course, honey. I'm dying to see the new acquisitions." As they approached the door where a security guard was checking invitations, they couldn't help but feel they were about to cross a point of no return. What happened tonight would change their lives forever. The guard looked at them suspiciously for a moment that seemed eternal. Then finally he nodded and gestured for them to enter. Catherine and Alexander exchanged a look of relief. The first part of the plan had worked. Now came the difficult part. As they entered the luxurious salon filled with New York's elite, they didn't notice the figure watching them from the shadows, a cold smile on his lips. "Let the game begin," the figure murmured, before disappearing into the crowd. The night had barely begun, and the secrets hidden in the dream of the blue gardenia were about to be revealed. For better or for worse, the gallery salon glimmered with the light of hundreds of candles and the tinkling of champagne glasses. Catherine and Alexander moved among the guests with practiced grace, perfectly playing their roles as wealthy art collectors. "Remember," Alexander whispered as they greeted a group of businessmen, "we need to find a way to get to the storage room without raising suspicion." Catherine nodded imperceptibly, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of a hidden entrance or a distracted guard. Suddenly, her gaze fell on a familiar figure. "Alexander," she murmured, "look who's here." Following her gaze, Alexander froze. Across the room, chatting animatedly with the gallery owner, was Richard. "What's he doing here?" Alexander whispered, tension evident in his voice. "I don't know, but this complicates things," Catherine replied. "We need to move, quickly." At that moment, the lights flickered briefly and a slight buzz was heard. The guests looked around, confused, but soon returned to their conversations. "That's Sullivan's signal," Alexander said. "The distraction will start any moment." As if his words had been a prophecy, suddenly a commotion was heard coming from the main entrance. The guards rushed to the front, and the guests began to murmur with concern. "Now," Catherine said, and they both discreetly slipped towards a side door they had identified earlier. Using a forged access card that Sullivan had provided them, they managed to enter a service hallway. They ran down the corridor, their steps muffled by the carpet, until they reached a door marked storage. "This is it," Alexander said, pulling out a small device from his pocket. He placed it on the security panel and, after a few tense seconds, the light changed from red to green. They quickly entered, closing the door behind them. The storage room was huge, filled with carefully packaged and labeled works of art. "We need to find the dream of the blue gardenia," Catherine said, beginning to search among the labels. After several minutes of frantic searching, Alexander exclaimed, "I found it!" They carefully removed the painting from its packaging and placed it under the light. At first glance, it seemed to be just a beautiful abstract painting, but upon closer inspection, they noticed something strange. "Look," Catherine said, pointing to some almost imperceptible small dots in the painting. "They're forming a pattern." Alexander took out his phone and took a close-up photo. Using a special app that Sullivan had provided them, he scanned the image. Suddenly, lines of text began to appear over the photo. "It's a coded message," Alexander said, his eyes wide with amazement. Emily hid information in the painting using nanotechnology. They began to read the deciphered message, their hearts pounding. "Project Phoenix is not what it seems. The Illuminati plan to use it to control the global energy network. The hive is the base of operations coordinates 40D Codi 42N 74 degrees CW. Matthew is the key. His DNA is compatible with Phoenix technology. Stop the E. Activation at all costs. Humanity depends on it. Emily." Catherine and Alexander looked at each other, horror reflected in their eyes. "My God," Catherine whispered, "they're going to use Matthew to activate Project Phoenix." Before they could fully process this revelation, they heard footsteps rapidly approaching. "We need to go," Alexander said, quickly putting away his phone. But it was too late. The door burst open, and there, flanked by armed guards, was Richard. "Well, well," Richard said with a cold smile. "Looks like we've caught some art thieves." Catherine and Alexander stood, motionless, trapped like rats. "Richard," Alexander said, trying to buy time. "What are you doing here?" Richard laughed. "Oh, Alexander. Always so naive. Did you really think you were the only one who knew about Project Phoenix? The Illuminati have been planning this for decades." "Where's Matthew?" Catherine demanded, fury replacing her fear. "Safe," Richard replied. "For now, soon, he'll be part of something much bigger than all of us." Suddenly, an explosion was heard in the distance. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the storage room into darkness. In the confusion, Catherine felt someone grab her arm. She was about to scream when she recognized Alexander's voice, whispering, "Run!" Taking advantage of the darkness and chaos, they managed to slip past the disoriented guards. They ran through the gallery hallways, dodging panicked guests and confused guards. When they finally emerged into the fresh night air, they saw Sullivan waiting for them in a car. "Quick, get in!" he shouted. As the car sped away from the gallery, Catherine and Alexander tried to catch their breath. "What was that explosion?" Alexander asked. Sullivan smiled grimly. "Plan B, I knew. Things could get complicated." "We have the information," Catherine said. "We know where the hive is and what they plan to do with Matthew." Sullivan nodded. "Good. Because according to my sources, whatever the Illuminati are planning, it's going to happen tomorrow at dawn." Alexander looked at Catherine, determination shining in his eyes. "Then we have until dawn to stop them and save Matthew." Catherine took his hand, squeezing it tightly, and to save the world. As the car sped away into the night, none of them noticed the drone silently following them, transmitting their location to an unknown destination. In the hive, a high-tech underground facility hidden on the outskirts of New York, a figure watched multiple screens on one of them. Matthew could be seen connected to a strange machine that pulsed with an ethereal blue energy. "Soon," the figure murmured, his voice filled with an almost religious anticipation. "Soon the Phoenix will awaken, and the world will be reborn from its ashes." The clock on the wall marked 11:59 p.m. The countdown to dawn had begun. As Catherine, Alexander, and Sullivan headed towards the hive, they knew they were facing the longest and most dangerous night of their lives. The fate of Matthew, and possibly that of all humanity, hung by a thread. Project Phoenix was about to be activated, and time was slipping through their fingers. Sullivan's car sped through the deserted streets of New York, heading towards the coordinates they had discovered in the painting. Catherine, Alexander, and Sullivan remained in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts and fears. "We need to come up with a plan," Alexander finally said, breaking the silence. "We can't just burst into the hive without a strategy." Sullivan nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "I have some contacts in the special forces. They could provide us with equipment and tactical support." "There's no time for that," Catherine interrupted. "Every minute that passes is another minute. Matthew is in danger. We have to act now." Alexander took Catherine's hand, feeling her desperation. "You're right, but we need to be smart. The Illuminati are powerful and well organized." As they discussed their options, Sullivan's phone rang. He put it on speakerphone. "Detective Sullivan," said a female voice on the other end of the line. "This is Dr. Martinez. Emily has woken up and is asking to speak to you urgently." The three exchanged surprised looks. "Put her on," Sullivan said. Emily's weak but determined voice filled the car. "Listen carefully. You don't have much time. The activation of Project Phoenix requires a specific sequence of events. First, they need Matthew's genetic signature to initiate the process. Then there's a sequence of codes that must be entered manually." "Emily," Alexander interrupted, "how do you know all this?" There was a pause on the line. "Because I helped design the system," Emily replied, her voice full of remorse, "before I realized what the Illuminati were planning to do with it." Catherine and Alexander looked at each other, surprised by this revelation. Emily continued, "The good news is that I can give you the codes to override the system. The bad news is that you'll have to enter them directly into the Hive's central computer." "And how are we supposed to do that?" Catherine asked. "There's a secondary entrance," Emily explained. "A maintenance tunnel that doesn't appear on the official plans. It will take you directly to the heart of the facility." Emily gave them detailed instructions on how to find the secret entrance and the override codes. When she finished, her voice broke slightly. "Please, save Matthew and stop this madness." "We will," Alexander promised. "Thank you, Emily." Armed with this new information, the trio adjusted their course. As they approached the coordinates, the urban landscape gave way to open fields and, finally, to an abandoned industrial zone. "This must be it," Sullivan said, stopping the car behind an old warehouse. Following Emily's instructions, they found the hidden tunnel entrance. It was a rusty metal door camouflaged to look like part of the warehouse structure. "Are you ready?" Alexander asked, looking at Catherine and Sullivan. They both nodded, determination shining in, their eyes with one last glance at the sky that was beginning to lighten in the east. They entered the dark tunnel, knowing that the fate of the world could depend on what happened in the next few hours. The tunnel was narrow and damp, dimly lit by emergency lights. They advanced in silence, alert to any sound that might indicate they had been discovered. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a high-security door Sullivan used. The codes provided by Emily, and with a hydraulic hiss, the door opened. They found themselves in a vast room filled with servers and high-tech equipment. In the center, on a raised platform, there was a structure that looked like a glass capsule. And inside it, connected to dozens of wires and tubes, was Matthew. "Matthew!" Catherine cried, running towards the capsule. "Wait!" Alexander stopped her just in time. There could be traps. At that moment, a cold laugh echoed through the room. From the shadows emerged a figure that Catherine and Alexander immediately recognized. "Richard," Alexander growled. But he wasn't alone at his side. To everyone's shock was Detective Sullivan. "I'm sorry," Sullivan said, his face a mask of guilt and resignation. "I had no choice." Richard smiled triumphantly. "Welcome to the Hive. You arrived just in time to witness the birth of a new world order." Catherine stepped forward, fury burning in her eyes. "Release Matthew right now." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Richard replied. "You see, Matthew is the key to all of this. His unique DNA is the catalyst we need to fully activate Project Phoenix." Alexander looked at Sullivan with contempt. "How could you betray us like this?" Sullivan lowered his gaze. "The Illuminati have my family. I had no choice." Richard continued, ignoring the exchange. "In a few minutes, when the sun rises, we'll initiate the final sequence. Project Phoenix will be activated. And We'll have absolute control over every energy source on the planet. You're insane, Catherine said. Don't you realize the damage you'll cause? Damage? Richard laughed. We'll bring order to a chaotic world, peace through power. It's the only way. While Richard monologued, Alexander noticed that Catherine had subtly moved towards a nearby console. He immediately recognized her intention. She was trying to reach the central computer to enter the override codes. He decided to keep Richard distracted. And what will happen to Matthew after you use him for your plans? Richard looked at the boy in the capsule with a strange mixture of fascination and disdain. He'll be remembered as the catalyst that changed the world. A small sacrifice for the greater good. Those words were the last straw for Catherine. With a cry of rage, she lunged towards the console, her fingers flying. Over the keyboard as she entered the codes Emily had given them. "Stop her!" Richard shouted, but it was too late. With a series of beeps and flashing lights, the systems began to shut down. The capsule containing Matthew opened with a hiss, and the cables disconnected. "No!" Richard roared, running towards the central console. "You can't stop this, it's our destiny!" In the midst of the chaos, Sullivan seemed to make a decision. He turned against Richard, knocking him down just as he was about to reach Catherine. Alexander ran to the capsule, taking Matthew in his arms. The boy was weak, but conscious. "Dad," he whispered. "I'm here, champ," Alexander said, tears of relief running down his cheeks. "You're safe." Catherine joined them, hugging them both tightly. For a moment, in the midst of the chaos, they were simply a reunited family. But their relief was short-lived. Alarms began to sound, and an AI voice resonated through the speakers. "Warning! Self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel must evacuate immediately." Richard, still on the ground, began to laugh hysterically. "If we can't have the power, no one will. This place will take all our secrets to the grave." Sullivan, who had been checking the computers, shouted, "We have 5 minutes before everything explodes." There was no time to celebrate their victory or to ask questions. The 5 of them, including Richard, who was handcuffed by Sullivan, ran towards the exit. They traversed the hive's corridors, which were now filled with panicked scientists and personnel trying to escape. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they emerged into the dawn light. They had barely reached a safe distance when a huge explosion shook the earth. The hive, with all its secrets and technology, collapsed upon itself in a cloud of dust and debris. Catherine, Alexander, and Matthew hugged each other. Exhausted but relieved, Sullivan kept Richard in custody while police and ambulance sirens approached in the distance. "It's over," Catherine whispered, stroking Matthew's hair. Alexander nodded, looking at the sun rising over the horizon. "A new day begins." As the authorities arrived and began to cordon off the area, our heroes knew that there were still many questions to answer and challenges to face the Illuminati, although beaten, surely hadn't been completely defeated. The world would need to know the truth about Project Phoenix and the dangers that still lurked in the shadows. But for now, in this moment of calm after the storm, Catherine, Alexander, and Matthew simply clung to each other, grateful to be together and safe. The love that had been born amidst chaos, and danger had triumphed. And although the future was uncertain, they knew they would face it together, as the family that fate had forged in the crucible of this incredible adventure. As the sun rose higher and higher, illuminating the remains of the hive, a new story began for them. A story of love, family, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness.